When I called my husband a 5 out of 10 who pays for everything during girls' night, I thought it was just harmless fun. I had no idea he was upstairs listening to every word through his own sound system. What I didn't realize was that Alex had already come home from his canceled business trip. He was upstairs taking a shower when Sarah asked if he was at least rich, and I laughed that listening to him talk about sound waves made me want to scream. But hey, those direct deposits were worth it. Olivia said I was terrible, and I told her I was just being practical. Boring pays for everything. Through his own acoustic ventilation system, every word was traveling perfectly to the bathroom, where my husband stood, frozen under the running water. I kept going, telling my friends how his hairline was racing his dad bod, to see which got worse first. They were dying laughing when I said I'd basically settled for financial security over actual attraction. I even joked about how unromantic he was in bed. But whatever. The mortgage wasn't going to pay itself. 20 minutes later, my friends left, and I found Alex standing in our bedroom doorway with the strangest expression I'd ever seen. I'm Julia, 32, and that one night of girl talk destroyed everything I'd built over 6 years with my husband Alex. Alex wasn't conventionally attractive, but his acoustic engineering work brought in serious money from studios nationwide. I didn't understand his passion for sound, but I definitely enjoyed the lifestyle it provided. While he traveled for work, I kept my part-time job at a boutique, more for fun than necessity. We met at a coffee shop where I was complaining loudly about my broken laptop to my friend Emma. Alex overheard and offered to help fix it. He spent 2 hours patiently explaining what was wrong and how to prevent it from happening again. I wasn't really listening, but I noticed his expensive watch and the way he casually mentioned owning his own business. Our first few dates were nice enough. He took me to expensive restaurants and always insisted on paying. When I mentioned loving a designer purse in a shop window, he surprised me with it the next week. I started to see the potential in this relationship. Alex would get excited talking about acoustic projects, explaining how sound waves worked, or showing me diagrams of studio designs. I'd smile and nod, but honestly, it was incredibly boring. I learned to look interested while thinking about other things. He seemed happy enough with my fake enthusiasm. When he proposed after 2 years, I said yes immediately. The ring was beautiful and expensive, and I knew he could provide the life I wanted. My friends were a little surprised since I'd never seemed that passionate about him, but I told them love wasn't just about butterflies and drama. We bought a beautiful house with Alex handling the down payment and mortgage. I insisted on keeping it in his name only, telling him I didn't want the responsibility if things went bad. It seemed smart at the time, protecting myself from financial burden. Alex installed this elaborate sound system throughout the house, explaining how the ventilation would carry audio perfectly between rooms. I rolled my eyes and called it unnecessary and pretentious, but he seemed so proud of his work that I didn't argue too much. The early years of marriage were comfortable. Alex traveled frequently for big studio projects, leaving me with plenty of freedom and a generous monthly allowance. I'd spend his money on clothes, spa days, and lunches with friends. When he came home excited about some acoustic breakthrough, I'd half listen while planning my next shopping trip. I'll admit I flirted sometimes when Alex wasn't around. Nothing serious, just enjoying the attention from guys at bars, or the cute barista at our coffee shop. When the barista asked for my number right in front of Alex last month, I giggled and said I was flattered before mentioning I was married. Alex looked uncomfortable, but I told him he was being insecure. My friends always joked about how I'd landed a sugar daddy, and I'd laugh along. It wasn't entirely wrong. Alex provided everything I wanted, and I provided companionship and the appearance of a happy marriage. It worked fine for both of us, or so I thought. That night when Alex was supposed to be in Austin, I'd planned the perfect girls' night. 3 bottles of wine, gossip, and our favorite game, where we rated everything from celebrities to our own relationships. Sarah suggested we rate our partners like a dating app, and everyone laughed. When it was my turn, I didn't hesitate. I told them Alex was maybe a 5, possibly 5.5 on a good day when he dressed nicely. Rachel asked what the appeal was then, and I explained that while he might not be much to look at, his bank account definitely made up for it. I described how he'd drone on about acoustic engineering while I pretended to care, just waiting for him to finish so I could ask for money for something I wanted. Olivia said that sounded awful, and I told her it really wasn't that bad, since the lifestyle was worth a few boring conversations. Sarah wanted to know about our romantic life, and I laughed that romance wasn't exactly Alex's strong suit. I said he approached everything, including our intimate moments, with the same methodical precision he used for his sound equipment. Technical, efficient, but not exactly thrilling. I was really getting into it by then, describing his receding hairline and how his dad bod was getting worse every year. I joked that I'd basically won the lottery by finding someone so desperate for companionship that he'd pay for everything without question. The wine had me feeling bold, so I told them about how I sometimes flirted with other guys just to feel attractive again. I said Alex was too insecure to call me out on it, which was probably for the best, since confidence wasn't exactly his thing anyway. When my friends finally left around 11, I was feeling pretty good about myself. I'd had fun, blown off some steam, and confirmed what I already knew. I was smart for choosing security over passion. That's when I saw Alex in the bedroom doorway. His face was completely blank, but his eyes looked different somehow. Not angry exactly, just empty. He asked if I'd had fun tonight, and his voice sounded weird, too calm and controlled. I tried to play it cool, even though my heart was racing. I told him it was just girl time and asked when he'd gotten back, since I thought he was supposed to be in Austin until Sunday. He said the client session had been canceled, and he'd gotten home around 9. 9 o'clock, right when we'd been deep into our rating game, right when I'd been describing his physical flaws and calling him a desperate meal ticket. I asked if he'd heard anything from the bathroom, and my mouth felt dry. He looked straight at me and said he'd heard every word, not just some of it, every single thing I'd said about him. The silence stretched between us like a wire about to snap. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. I felt trapped, but tried laughing it off. I told him it was just stupid girl talk, that everything gets exaggerated when we're together drinking. I said he knew how women get when they're gossiping. We were just being silly. Alex asked if I looked like he was laughing. His expression was terrifying in its complete stillness. He stood there like a statue, just watching me scramble for explanations. I tried switching tactics, going on the offensive. I asked if he'd been spying on me, calling it creepy behavior. How long had he been listening? Was this some kind of trap? He looked genuinely confused and said he'd come home to his own house and taken a shower, not knowing I was entertaining guests. He pointed out that the vent system he'd installed himself had carried my voice upstairs, the same system I'd called unnecessary and pretentious when he'd explained how it would enhance sound circulation. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. I felt cornered, so I told him he was overreacting. I said everyone talks about their partners with friends. It doesn't mean anything serious. It was just venting, nothing more. Alex's face got harder then. He asked if I'd meant it, if I really saw him as just an ATM with a pulse. His voice cracked slightly on the word pulse. I started to say, of course not, that I loved him, but he backed away when I tried to step closer. He said that wasn't what I told my friends. He repeated my exact words about his job being boring, as watching paint dry, but the direct deposits being regular enough to make it worthwhile. Word for word, like he'd memorized them. I felt a flash of real anger then. I told him it was a joke, and he needed to learn to take one. Why was he taking everything so seriously? Alex rubbed his temples and said jokes were supposed to be funny. He said what wasn't funny was realizing your wife of 4 years saw you as nothing but a meal ticket. He looked physically sick saying it. I tried to touch his arm, but he pulled away like I'd burned him. I told him he was being ridiculous, that I'd married him because I loved him. Didn't 4 years together mean anything? He looked at me for a long moment and said no, that the night had made it crystal clear I'd married him because he made good money. He said there was a difference between loving someone and loving what they provided. Then he turned and walked toward the guest room. I called after him asking where he was going, and he said he couldn't look at me right now. Not tonight. I went to bed alone, annoyed at his sensitivity. I figured by morning he'd realize he was overreacting. Men always get upset over nothing and then forget about it after a good night's sleep. This would blow over by breakfast. We'd laugh about it eventually. But when I woke up, Alex had already left. No note, no text, nothing. The coffee maker was still warm, so he'd been there recently, but he was gone. I figured he needed space and went about my day normally. When he didn't come home for dinner, I started feeling uneasy. I texted him asking where he was, but got no response. My calls went straight to voicemail. Even his work phone was off. By the second day, I was getting worried. By the third day of complete silence, I was furious. He was punishing me over one stupid comment like a child. This silent treatment was getting ridiculous. On day 4, he finally came home, but the Alex who walked through our door wasn't the man I'd married. There was this icy detachment I'd never seen before. He moved through our house like a stranger, like he didn't belong there anymore. He went straight to his home office without even acknowledging I was there. I followed him, ready for a fight. I asked if this was his mature response, giving me the silent treatment for almost a week. I told him we needed to talk about this like adults. Alex looked up from his laptop with completely vacant eyes. He said he'd been staying at a hotel while he figured out what to do, and he'd made his decision. The way he said it made my stomach drop. Something in his tone made my stomach drop. I asked what he was talking about. He said he'd spent those days reviewing our entire relationship, and the patterns had always been there, but he'd chosen to ignore them. He described how I'd light up whenever he bought me something, but zone out completely when he talked about his work. How I'd introduce him to people by describing what he did, never who he was as a person. How I'd be affectionate after he gave me my monthly spending allowance, but suddenly too tired when he needed emotional support. I protested that wasn't fair, but he continued like I hadn't spoken. He said he'd hired a lawyer yesterday and was filing for divorce. I felt like someone had thrown ice water in my face. I asked if he was seriously talking about divorce over one stupid girls' night comment. Alex stood up and said it wasn't one comment. It was the truth finally coming out. He said he'd transferred my portion of our joint accounts to a new account in my name, which should be enough to get me set up somewhere else. I asked what he meant by somewhere else, since this was my house too. He said actually it wasn't. The house was in his name only, which I'd insisted on because I didn't want responsibility for the mortgage if things went bad. He reminded me those were my exact words. I had said that when we bought the place, thinking I was protecting myself. I never imagined it would backfire like this. Alex said I had 2 weeks to find somewhere else to live. He'd be staying at the hotel until then. As he walked past me toward the door, I grabbed his arm and begged him not to do this. I said we could work it out, that this was crazy. For just a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of the old Alex, the one who could never say no to me. But then his expression went cold again. He said there was nothing to work out. I'd shown him who I really was, and he believed me. After he left, I sat in his office for hours trying to process what had happened. How had a few careless words spiraled into this nightmare? I called Rachel, sobbing that Alex was divorcing me over what we'd said during girls' night. There was an uncomfortable pause before she said, I'd said some pretty harsh things no one should say about someone they love. I couldn't believe she was taking his side. I asked if she was seriously supporting him over me. Rachel said she wasn't taking sides. But maybe I should think about how Alex felt hearing those things. I hung up on her. Some friend she was. I called Sarah next, then Olivia. Both conversations went the same way. Apparently, everyone thought I was the villain in this story. Fine. If Alex wanted to blow up our marriage over this, I'd make him regret it. I'd fight for every penny and see how he liked that. Two could play this game. But first, I needed to secure my position. I went to our safe where we kept emergency cash and important documents. It was completely empty. Not just the cash, everything. Birth certificates, passports, investment papers. All gone. My heart started racing as I checked our joint accounts online. They were all empty except for the new account Alex had mentioned, which contained exactly 3 months of my usual spending money. Not nearly enough for the expensive lawyer I'd need. He'd planned this perfectly. I was completely trapped, and he knew it. The next day, official divorce papers arrived by certified mail. No-fault divorce, citing irreconcilable differences. No spousal support beyond the 3 months of expenses he'd already provided. Clean, efficient, final. The prenup was a nightmare I'd created for myself. I'd signed it without reading, thinking it would protect my future inheritance from my grandmother. Instead, it gave me zero claim to Alex's business, retirement accounts, or the house. Every asset I'd grown accustomed to was legally his. Every safety net I thought I had was actually his rope. All our joint accounts had been emptied, except for one new account, containing exactly 3 months of my usual spending allowance. The emergency cash from our safe was gone. Even my credit cards were in his name, and he'd already canceled them. My phone started buzzing with declined payment notifications. His lawyer's letter was coldly professional. Given our short marriage duration and my employable status, no court would award long-term spousal support. I was entitled to nothing beyond the 3 months he'd generously provided. The word generously felt like a slap. My parents refused to help when I called crying. My mother said I'd made my bed and now had to lie in it. My father was even blunter, asking what I'd expected when I married someone for money, and then insulted him publicly. Even they saw right through me. I tried everything to win Alex back during those final 2 weeks. I cooked his favorite lasagna and left it in the fridge with a love note saying how sorry I was. When he came to collect some clothes, the untouched food was still there, and he threw the whole container in the trash without reading my note. Like it meant nothing. Like I meant nothing. I bought expensive lingerie with my dwindling money, thinking I could seduce him back to his senses. When he stopped by for more belongings, I answered the door wearing barely anything. He looked right through me like I was invisible and asked me to put some clothes on. His voice was so cold, so disgusted. I left tearful voicemails that got longer and more desperate each time. I explained how much I loved him, how the girls' night was just stupid drunk talk, how I'd never meant any of it, how we could go to counseling, how I'd change, how I'd be better. I promised I'd never drink with my friends again, never complain about him, never take him for granted. After the fifth message, his number went straight to voicemail without ringing. He'd blocked me completely. I wrote long letters apologizing and slipped them under his hotel room door. Pages and pages of explanations, promises, begging. I told him about all the times I'd been proud of his work, how I'd bragged about him to strangers, how I defended him when my friends made jokes about engineers. They came back unopened in my mailbox 3 days later, with return to sender, written in his neat handwriting. He hadn't even given me the dignity of reading them. Getting desperate, I called his mother. I explained how Alex was overreacting to one mistake, how he was throwing away 4 years of marriage over drunk girl talk. I told her how much I loved her son, how this was just a misunderstanding blown out of proportion. She listened quietly, then said she'd raised her son to know his worth and was proud he was finally acting like it. She hung up without saying goodbye. Even his family had turned against me, like I was some toxic influence they needed to protect him from. I even tried reaching out through our mutual friends, begging them to talk sense into him. Rachel told me she couldn't believe I was still playing the victim after what she'd heard me say. Sarah said maybe I should think about how my words had made Alex feel, instead of how the consequences were affecting me. Even Olivia, who'd laughed the hardest at my comments, said she couldn't support me on this one. They all acted like I was some kind of monster who'd committed an unforgivable crime. 14 days after making that critical comment about my husband, I was forced to leave my home. The home I'd helped choose, helped decorate, helped make into something beautiful. Now it felt like a stranger's house. As I loaded my suitcases into my car, Alex arrived to change the locks one final time. I told him he was destroying our marriage over something so minor, over words that didn't even matter. He looked at me and said no. I'd thrown it away the night I called him a 5 out of 10 ATM. He said my words had just revealed what was already true, what had always been true. The apartment I found was everything my old life wasn't. Thin walls that let through every neighbor's argument, creaky floors, a broken air conditioner that the landlord refused to fix. The acoustics were terrible, with echoes and sound bleeding that would have made Alex cringe. But Alex wasn't there to fix it, and I couldn't afford anyone who could. I was stuck with the constant noise, the bad ventilation, the cheap construction. My part-time boutique job barely covered rent, so I had to take evening shifts waiting tables at a chain restaurant. My hands got dry and cracked from washing dishes when the restaurant was short-staffed. My feet ached from standing all day, then standing all night. I'd never worked this hard in my life, and it still wasn't enough. The designer clothes I'd accumulated started looking ridiculous in my new life. I couldn't afford dry cleaning, so my expensive dresses hung unworn while I lived in the same 3 outfits suitable for my jobs. The beautiful things that had once defined me became useless reminders of what I'd lost. I felt like a fraud wearing $1,000 shoes to serve burgers and fries. 3 months after the divorce was finalized, my car got repossessed. I'd been using the last of Alex's money to pay rent and had fallen behind on everything else. Taking buses to both jobs added 2 hours to my daily commute. When I couldn't make rent the next month, I had to swallow my pride and ask my sister if I could crash on her couch temporarily. She said yes, but made it clear she thought I'd brought this all on myself. That's when I saw photos that completely destroyed me. Alex with some brunette named Claire, who was actually smiling as he explained something about acoustic engineering to her. She looked genuinely interested, leaning in close and asking questions. Her caption read, "Finally found someone who appreciates my genius," with heart emojis. The comments were full of support from people I used to consider friends. Everyone saying how happy Alex looked, how he deserved someone who valued him, how Claire seemed perfect for him. I wanted to comment something cruel, to remind everyone that I'd been his wife for 4 years, that this new girl was just a rebound. But when I tried to log in, I realized he'd blocked me on everything months ago. I couldn't even see his posts unless someone else shared them. My sister keeps telling me I need to admit my mistake. She says it wasn't just one comment. It was what that comment revealed about how I never appreciated Alex. I still think his reaction was completely over the top. Everyone vents about their partners sometimes. If Alex had been more confident in himself, my words wouldn't have destroyed him like that. But sometimes, lying on